Shabbat Shalom. Rabbi Morantz, it's so nice to see you this evening.
Let's start over, Shelley. Okay.
Yeah, were you muted the whole
I was working a rock concert there. I was muted the entire time. God bless everyone. Very good. All right. Let us Bruchim Habaim, Shelley, Cantor Friedman, nice to see you.
Good to see you,
Dear
Rabbi.
Macaulay family, we're pleased to welcome you here. Joe and Mike, nice to see you. And Maddie, of course, we're here to kind of practice bat mitzvah, aren't we? And really great to be here. Leah Jones, thank you for your presence. And we're gonna do a nigun to Ani Ve'ata, because I think that if we're going to change the world we're living in, we're going to do so together, not just as individuals, but as partners, as friends, as members of a community, as a collective force for good. Shabbat Shalom, one and all. Ya la la la, ya la la, ya la la. Ya la la la, ya la la, la 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 la. Ya la 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 la, ya la la, ya la la la. Ya la la la, ya la la, ya la la. Ya la la la, ya la la, ya la la. Ya la la la, ya la la, ya la la la. Ya la 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 la, ya la la, ya la la la. Ya la la la, ya la la, ya la la. Ya la la la, ya la la, ya la la. All right, that was a good take two. I think we're ready for action moving forward. Cantor, take it away.
That was a good take two. I'll take that anytime. Well, Macaulay's, as the rabbi said, we are so glad you are joining us on what would have been Maddie's bat mitzvah weekend, but we're going to do it another take two in that instance as well. We invite you, however, to help us kindle Shabbat candles. And Mike, if you would start us off with a reading.
As these Shabbat candles give light to all who behold them, so may we, by our lives, give light to all who behold us. As their brightness reminds us of the generations of Israel who have kindled light, so may we, in our own day, be among those who kindle light.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kishanu b'tzmotav v'tzivnanu lihadlik shel Shabbat.
Amen. And we invite you to rise either physically or spiritually for our Kiddush. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei pari hagafen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'ratza banu v'shabbat kodsho be'ahava uvratzon chinchilanu zikaron lema'aseh bereshit ki hu yom tehillah lemikra'ei kodesh zecher letziat mitzrayim kivanu v'harta v'otanu kiddashta mikol ha'amim v'shabbat קודשך באהבה וברצון הנהגנו. ברוך אתה אדוני מקדש השבת לחיים. You may be seated. So I hope you'll join in singing. It's just the last line of that little paragraph and going on. Boikala, 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 boikala. Boikala, 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 boikala. L'chaduti, l'katkala, b'nei Shabbat.
Chevre, as we continue with the Baruch Hu, we say, please rise in body and or spirit, because it's absolutely essential that our prayer experience be accessible to anyone who wants to access it. And so if praying by standing is something that creates that access, then we stand. And if praying with a sense of spiritual uplift and inspiration, because our legs, for example, work differently, and we prefer to sit but somehow rise in spirit, then that becomes the way we access our prayer experience. And it means a lot to have that openness, because I know that inclusion is really a matter of effort, not just attitude. And so we want to reflect not only the attitude, but the effort in the words that we say and the actions that we do. And so we call ourselves to worship in body and or spirit. Ya la 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 la. Ya la 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 la. Ya la 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 la. Ya la 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 la. Ya la 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 la. Ya la 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 la. Ya la la ya la. Ya la 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 la. Baruch Hu et Adonai Amevorah. Baruch Adonai Amevorah, Amevorah Leolam Vayed. We continue with a special reading from a book I introduced, I believe, last week. It's called Mishkan Ga'ava, where pride dwells. Celebration of LGBTQ Jewish life and ritual. And here is a perspective on Ahavat Olam. You have loved the people of Israel with a never-ending love. You've given us your Torah, laws, and statutes to guide us so that our lives may be filled with holiness and happiness. We know that we must find ways to strengthen our faith and hope in you. Your Torah acts as our inspiration. Help us, oh God, to find ways to renew our commitments as Jews. Teach us to feel proud of all our identities. For you, Eternal One, made us who we are. We say, praised are you, source of all, who is the lover of the people of Israel. Baruch atah Adonai, ohev amo Yisrael. Blessed are you, who loves your people, Israel.
Maddie, I invite you. You can stay seated. It's all right. The great thing about the Shema is if you're sitting, you can stay seated for sure. If you're standing, you can stand. If it's your minhag, you can stand. Rabbi just explained that you are where you are, and that's just where you're meant to be. So if you would please lead us in the Shema.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad, Baruch Shem Kevod Malchuto, Le'olam Va'ed.
ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודך. והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבבך, ושיננתם לבניך ודיברת בם בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך ובשוכבך ובקומך, וקשרתם להיות על ידך והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך, למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם. אני אדוני אלוהיכם אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים להיות לכם לאלוהים. אני אדוני אלוהיכם.
Did before Ahavat Olam. All right. The first reading did before Ahavat Olam was by Rabbi Denise Eger. This one is by Devin Spear. I have seen the narrow place where beauty is broken and redemption floats like Moshe in the basket along the river Fate. Here the tearful triumphs, the destitute prospers, and the beggar becomes the giver of the whole world. Here God's words flow from the narrowness, and the prophet is disguised as a human being, quietly creating the passageways that lead us to freedom's mighty sea. Chamocha, Bailim Adonai, Chamocha, Neda Bakodesh, Ora Dehilo, Hosefele, Ora Dehilo, Yosef Elef. Won't you help me sing these songs of freedom, all we ever had? Redemption songs, these songs of freedom, redemption songs.
And now, Maddie, we invite you to rise, physically or spiritually. Maddie, would you do us the honor, please, of leading us in the tefillah?
Adonai, Sefer Tiftach, Ufia, Gitehilatecha. Eternal God, open my lips that my mouth may declare your glory. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu ve'Elohei Avotenu ve'imotenu. Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzchak, ve'Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Leah, ve'Elohei Rachel, Ha'el Hagibor v'Hanora, El Elyon, Gomel Chasadim Tovim, Ve'koneh HaKol, Ve'socher Hastei Avot V'himahot, Umevi Geula Livnei Ve'enem, Lema'an Shemo Ba'ahava. Melech Hotzir U'Moshia U'Magen, Baruch atah Adonai, Magen Avraham ve'etzrat Sarah. Atah gibor le'olam, Adonai, v'chayei hakol atah raf lehoshia. Morid hatal, mechalkel chayim bechesed, v'chayei hakol b'rachamim rabim. Somech noflim, v'rofeh cholim, umati asurim, umkayem emunato lishanei afar, michamocha ba'al givurot, umido melech nimit umchaye, umotmiach Yeshua, v'ne'eman atah lechayot hakol. Baruch atah Adonai, mechayei hakol.
Kadosh Shim HaKadosh, u'kadoshim b'chol yom yaluha, Selah. Baruch atah Adonai, ha'el hakadosh.
Please take a moment for your own private prayers, your meditations, your reflections, your ruminations. It's all about you and what's going on inside of you. And so take that moment, and then we'll get back to our communal experience.
Oh, say shalom limrama. Oh, ya Yaseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'himeru Yaseh shalom, Yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Yaseh shalom, Yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Yaseh shalom, Yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Yaseh shalom, Yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Yaseh shalom, Yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael.
So, Chevre, we continue rather with Seder Kriyat HaTorah Shabbat, our Torah service. Cantor, please.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Echad Eloheinu, Gadol Adonenu, Kadosh Shemo. Joe, if you would be kind enough to do the blessing before the reading of Torah, then, Maddie, I will chant. Now, if I make a mistake, Maddie, all right? Joe. Try again, Joe. We're ready now.
Okay. Baruch et Adonai Hamvara.
Baruch Adonai Havarach Le'olam Va'ed.
Baruch Adonai Hamvara Le'olam Va'ed. Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech Haolam, Asher Babanu Michalam Hamim, Vatan Banu et Torato. Baruch Atah Adonai Noten HaTorah.
Amen. Vaydaber Adonai el Moshe lemor. Daber el bnei Yisrael va'amarta alehem moadei Adonai asher tikra'u otam mikra'ei kodesh ele הם מועדיי, ששת ימים תעשה מלאכה, וביום השביעי שבת שבתון מקרא קודש, כל מלאכה לא תעשו, שבת היא לאדוני בכל מושבותיכם. Adonai spoke to Moses saying, speak to the entirety of the Israelite community and say to them, these are my fixed seasons, the fixed times of God, which you shall proclaim as sacred occasions. On the 6 days, malacha, a certain kind of work might be done, but on the 7th day, there shall be a Sabbath of complete rest, a sacred occasion. You shall do no malacha, no work. It shall be a Sabbath of Adonai throughout your settlements. Joe, the blessing after, please.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lanu Torah emet, v'asher l'olam nata potenu, Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen.
Shabbat shalom lekulam, a Sabbath of peace to one and all. I am so pleased to see you here on this Shabbat Emor, which also is corresponded to Mother's Day weekend. So early wishes for a happy Mother's Day to all celebrating, even those remembering on this Shabbat. We are with you, and we thank you for the opportunity to celebrate this Shabbat with you tonight and tomorrow. Last week, our double portion, Achrei Mot Kedushim, framed the pursuit of holiness as both an inward and outward journey. In Achrei Mot, with Yom Kippur in view, Torah summons us to turn inward with a spirit of tshuva, of turning back to God and our better selves. In Kedoshim, modeling our holiness after the Holy One of Blessings, Torah calls us to face outwardly, loving our neighbors, paying fair wages, and respecting those living with different abilities, namely not cursing the deaf, nor placing a stumbling block before the blind. Such an inclusive message, really, particularly in terms of how we shall honor those living with disabilities. But then, strangely in a way, seems to me, when we turn to this week's Torah portion, Parshat Emor, still on the very same pathway to holiness, we encounter a challenge to this virtue of inclusion, namely, priests with blemishes on their hands and other disabilities are disqualified from performing sacrificial duties. Such disqualification is an act of exclusion, not inclusion, a strange and contrary postscript to last week's message. So why then the radical shift? Well, from a classic point of view, we know that the Kohen works between us, the people, and God. On one hand, then, the priest represents the people to God. But on the other hand, the Kohen represents God to the people. And in its role, apparently, tradition tells us that the priest must possess a certain perfection, not compromised in any way by physical or spiritual imperfections. A priest who possesses such imperfections because of disabilities or blemishes cannot rise to leadership. So then let's take a deeper dive into, I warn, a very problematic perspective. According to the Rambam, in his Guide for the Perplexed, also known in Hebrew as Moreh Nebuchim, in order to exalt the temple and the sacrificial practice of avodah, there were two essential requirements. First, the priests had to wear the most splendid, finest, and most beautiful garments, holy garments for splendor and for beauty, as scripture tells us. And second, as explained in the regulations of the legal science dealing with the commandment, a priest could not have infirmities or deformities. Why these two requirements, you may ask? For to the multitude, the Rambam continues, an individual is not rendered great by his true form, but by the perfection of his limbs and the beauty of his clothes. And what is aimed at is that the temple and its servants should be regarded as great by all. the complexity continues later in the Shulchan Aruch. We learn here that a disabled priest is prohibited from duchanen, from raising his hands and offering the Birkat Kohanim, the priestly blessing. And again, why, you may ask, does our classic commentary place such limits on this priest? Because people will stare at him and presumably talk only about his disabilities. From a more contemporary, even secular point of view, Rabbi Daniel Deutsch points out, or makes analogy rather, to the changing of the guard at Buckingham Palace. If the throngs of tourists saw that one of the soldiers was limping, missing a limb, or otherwise physically imperfect, would they shrug it off? No. Their awe of the palace would become just as imperfect. If such a soldier were transferred to serve the queen in a less public position, would that show insensitivity to the disabled? No. It would show insensitivity to the image of royalty. Whew. You know, I've struggled with such explanations of priestly exclusion since the first time I ever studied this parashah, way back in rabbinic school. I don't wish to disrespect the sanctity of the temple nor the sacred practice of avodah, but when the priest is so excluded, not because he truly lacks some moral character or some demonstrable merit, but because people are going to stare too long and then perhaps cringe or gossip about his disabilities, or they might invoke some medieval science as permission for their prejudice, or they'll justify their insensitivity to a human being as sensitivity to God's glory. I don't buy it. I don't buy any of it. We adorn God's glory by acting in God's image, however abled we may be. But B'Tselem Elohim means we, blemishes and all, have infinite value and can lead each other down a holy path, regardless whether one is a priest or a rabbi or a cantor or a Jew in the virtual pew. And for sure, no matter how one may be abled, one can bring spiritual beauty to the world and inspiration and fulfillment as well. Here, perspective is key. Look at one's life one way, and it's easy to include and celebrate. Look at that same life a different way, and it's just as easy to exclude and denigrate. The choice, Chevre, is ours. In the words of Israeli Rabbi Shai Piron, the ultimate problem is not with the disabled person, but with the community. Those who, when they see someone disabled, do not see the person, but only see his or her blemishes. If you see a Kohen, a regular person, then you can be blessed by him and he can bless you. But if most of your energy is directed at the disability and you are unable to see his human side, then you cannot be blessed by him and he cannot be blessed by you. And then, without such mutual capacity to bless, how are we really supposed to practice mitzvot like ve'ahavta l'reacha kamocha? To love your neighbor as yourself? How will we ever refrain from insulting the deaf? How are we to build Klal Yisrael, a Jewish unity based on shared responsibility for one another? And maybe most problematic, What are we even to make of the essential ethics of our Torah? It is true, Hebrei, our Torah has morally troubling material. Tolerance of slavery, subjugation of women, homophobia, wiping out nations already living in the promised land. And this week, unfortunately, a clear example of ableism. And yet we stick with Torah. And not just because of its positive contradictions that we can find in many places to its biases. Don't hate your sibling in your heart. Don't place a stumbling block before the blind. B'Tselem Elohim, the list goes on and on. But as we make our way to Sinai, if we can see Matan Torah, the gift of Torah, not as a one-time event, but as an ongoing and progressive effort of what God requires of us, then we can come to see revelation not as some dictation that happened thousands and thousands of years ago, one time, but we can see it as divine inspiration, documented by human understanding, which you and I both know changes over time and improves as well, if we let it. Which means we can take a second look, we can take a third look, we can take whatever looks we need to take at our texts, like the one we read today, and we can improve upon these texts and their morality. What's interesting is while I find inspiration from this idea from Reform Judaism's Pittsburgh platform of 1999, and I draw on the wisdom of fine teacher Michael A. Meyer, professor of history at Hebrew Union College, I also find here echoes of this vision in the teaching of Orthodox masters like Rabbi Eliyahu Meir Bloch of Telz, who writes, the disqualification of a Kohen with a mum, that's a blemish, isn't because the blessed Creator doesn't want him. God forbid. Rather, it is because of the weakness of people who do not feel the same respect for someone with a mum as for someone who is healthy in every body part. We learn from this that the Torah's rules aren't based on an abstract truth. Rather, it's a living Torah. It doesn't command us to ignore human emotions, even when in truth, they are not correct. But I think the medieval sage, Joseph ibn Pekuda, gets right to the point. Because ultimately, our Torah is a vessel of truth, but we don't always see the truth the same way. So in a sense, I would add just that this last piece of Rabbi Eliyahu Meir Bloch, I don't agree with. Don't believe the Torah is correct on any level with respect to those living with disabilities. So Joseph ibn Pekuda helps us here when he says, with his feet firmly planted, honestly planted on the ground, he says, preoccupation with watching other people's blemishes would prevent me from investigating my own, a task more urgent. At the end of the day, we're called to judge our own truth and not to worry so much about another's. In this case, judgment distracts us from looking within, from doing that work of making ourselves better. We're worried so much about why everyone else is not better, not more whole, not more able. Then we will lose every opportunity we can to look within and to grow and to evolve and to change. The question remains, how often do we spend more time judging others for their own shortcomings as a way of distracting ourselves from our own? Parashat Timor each and every year reminds me of the power of healthy perspective. Shabbat is just the time for such a healthy perspective, a time to find it, a time to sharpen it, a time to challenge it, and a time to change it. Shabbat is a time for healthy perspective, a time to see the extraordinary in the ordinary, a time to recognize what really matters, a time to question what doesn't, a time to give thanks for new insights and confirm beliefs. Shabbat is indeed a time for perspective, a time to see the holy in the vulnerable, a time to see the intrinsic worth of all people, a time to think about what it's like to walk in someone else's shoes, to look within and make sure we are the force for good we want to be. Time to slow and calm our judgment, and a time to take all these perspectives and humbly and purposely propel them forward into the rest of our lives, which requires the same moral excellence as Shabbat summons. So in that spirit, I wish you all Shabbat Shalom. Chevre, thank you for the opportunity to wrestle with our text and to wrestle with our traditions and the various perspectives. I hope that we can continue this conversation. Definitely is one that is worth shared engagement. This weekend was supposed to be our important collaboration with JCFS, Jewish Child and Family Services, and the Lakeview Synagogues, with whom we partner. As you may remember, during these special weekends, we take on difficult subjects that are hard to talk about, but are important to talk about. So the focus for this weekend was fertility journeys, the joys, the sorrows of such journeys, the triumphs and tragedies of such journeys. We wanted to take a moment to focus on what might have been, because what might have been not only would help us consider such journeys and their importance, but given that we are living in a time that prohibits such a conversation in a larger setting, because we can't really go out, we can't really connect other than in this virtual space. Perspective is absolutely key on how we continue to make our lives meaningful. Now, that's always true, but it seems even more true now as we are seeking to be more connected, and yet it's difficult to be connected. And so it's interesting when you have competing perspectives, you're not sure which direction to travel. This Shabbat calls on us to consider perspective. Mother's Day, for example, can be both wonderful and challenging, and it can be both. We can feel a sense of wholeness or not. We can feel a sense of calm. Of course, we can feel anxious. We can feel happy, and we can feel sad. We can feel hopeful, and we can worry. This weekend summons all of those emotions. It's important for us to recognize the varied and at times competing perspectives. And in general, perspective as a practice, as a discipline, summons our sensitivity and our empathy for all sorts of challenges, whether along a fertility journey or to dealing with this COVID chaos. So, sensitivity and empathy, more generally speaking, even though we are living a life that has the same amount of time in it each day, same amount of hours and days each week, but just as some of us feel connected, some of us feel isolated. And just as some of us go online with the greatest of ease, some of us don't even have a computer to do so. While some of us shelter in place, I learned just the other day, my first outing out into the world after a month or two, some are sheltering in warming buses that I never knew existed. Some are working, some are not. But one thing is clear here, is whatever perspective dominates our moment here, we all deserve the same renewal of body and spirit. And so I share with you, before we get to the Mishabera and before we count the Omer, I offer you this prayer that I wrote because there was a time where we struggled to be fertile. And the struggle was shared by Betsy and me, but it was mine mostly. My fertility that was elusive and made it hard for us to conceive. And grateful that our perspective was able to shift. And I pray that our perspectives shift for the positive and for the whole and for the better. So I offer this prayer for any who are seeking fertility and the wholeness that comes. And please make my body fertile so that my lifeblood may flow and my legacy may live in the life of a child I have helped to create. Please support and calm me as I seek the most precious blessing. Grant me patience and forgiveness for myself and those I love as I search for this elusive abundance. Help me, O God, to find wholeness of body and of spirit. And for those on a fertility journey or some other journey that are feeling less whole, that are struggling, that are feeling anxious, may our Mishaberach today help you find some level of wholeness. Think of those in need of healing. Noreen Alper, Judy Altman, Tanya Barliant, David Burchett, Fega Sora Badchaya, Linda Danielson, Gita Domsky, Francine Fields, Lana Fields, Don Grandolfo, Mimi Harris, Werner Hyman, Jane Herron, Priscilla Hill, Larry Jones, Harold Katz, Molly Klee, Anne-Marie Kuleza, Robert Langfelder, Holly Lipschultz, Roy Lloyd, Stephen Martinez, Gerald Marks, Richard MacArthur, Stephen Melnick, Deep Meserve, Deborah Miller, Jimmy Miller, Scott Montgomery, Joe Mosciano, Moshe Ben Chava Vinatan, Jordan Ehrenberg, Nicole Newcomb, Larry O'Neill, Don Olson, Mark Perlman, Betty Rudolph, Alan Sager, Leah Botsera, Kristen Rouse Skinner, Maria Sklyanskaya, Linda Stahl, Tali Stein, Kirk Stokes, Virginia Wharton, Mike Van Buren, Nachum Feivel Ben Gadayu Masha, all those struggling with COVID-19, all those who have contracted the virus in service of healing, all those who are anxious or feeling disconnected or feeling some sense of loss on this weekend for whatever reason, and your heart is low, may you feel a healing on this Shabbat. Any others?
Additional names from our congregation include Fred Lauritsen, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, Jim Kelso, Phil Goldstecker, Becky Hanscom, Rebecca Lockett, Roby Wayne, Carol Cohen, George Washington, Terry and Stuart Epstein, Gregory Sklavos, Alan Tellisman, Doreen Angst, Mark Bergman, Leo Jacoel, Allison Good, Bonnie Fields Leibovich, Debbie Watts, Carmen Villa, Tom McGinty, Bonnie Pearlstein, Tracy Asher, Eugene Pavilon, Bob Heyman, Dolores Miller, Cheryl Miller, Kevin Kaiser, Carmel Glarner, Bella Eisenstadt, Stacy Robinson, Mindy Jordan, Rabbi Douglas Goldhammer, and those are the names from our congregation. Oh, yes.
Refuah Shlema, renewal of body and spirit to one and all. A special version of the Mishaberach tonight I think you'll enjoy.
Yes, okay.
How was that?
Really cool.
Well done. Thank goodness for technology.
That's for sure.
Wonderful. So now we're going to take this energy of compassion and sensitivity, and we're going to take the power of perspective. We're going to use that as our frame to practice Sfirat HaOmer, to count the Omer, because we need to take that sensitivity with us, that compassion with us. It's part of our virtual toolbox. And the deep knowledge that our Torah is a living Torah, that is an evolving Torah, and that with it, its truth morphs in ways that changes sometimes the original meaning and gives it more power in our lives and is even worthy of greater respect from us. That's the Torah we want to receive at Sinai. And so it's in that spirit that we bless. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu al Sfirat HaOmer, which we conclude with the following. Hayom shlishim yom, shehem arba'a shvuot u'shnei yamim la'omer. Today is day 30 of the Omer. which corresponds to 4 weeks and 2 days of the Omer. We're ready to begin concluding our service.
I invite you to rise either physically or spiritually as Maddie leads us in the Aleinu. Aleinu l'shabeach.
Aleinu l'shabeach l'adon hakol, latet gedula leotzer breshit, shelo asanu kegoyer, haratzot, velo samanu kemishpotat adama, shelo sam chalkinu kahem, vigoraleinu kachol hamonam. Anachnu korim umishtachavim umodim lifnei melech malchei lachim hakadosh baruch hu. V'ne'emar v'haya Adonai lemelech al kol haaretz vayom ha'u yihiel Adonai echad u'shemo echad.
Yay. It's okay. Got
It's
there.
been a while.
See that, Maddie? Practice makes progress. Presence, not perfection, right? We
Yeah.
know that our truth here is that we stand, or however, body and or spirit, with a sense of purpose. We all possess the capacity and the right to engage our community in meaningful prayer. All of us. Our truth is that we all belong in that place of leadership, and you are doing great. So let us continue with a reflection on the power of this moment. So, as I mentioned, Mother's Day is a powerful time. It can draw forth some of our greatest joys. It can remind us of some of our greatest sorrows and longings. And the perspectives are wide just in that frame. But it is also true that some of us are remembering our mothers and would much prefer to have them by our sides, living a virtuous and transformative life that they lived when they were here, but they are gone. And so it is possible that our Mother's Day is mingled with the sadness of loss. And it is important for us as a community to recognize the complexity of this time and all the emotions that come together, including the will and the desire and the inspiration to mourn loss, but also to make loss matter. And mothers often are good at helping us make our lives matter. And so it's in that spirit that we remember any mothers that we would like to remember during this Shabbat Emor. And in addition, we remember the following who have died recently: Joseph Goldner, Joanne Kratchman, Albert and Gwen Miller, Opal Floyd, Alan Wagner. In addition, we observe the following Yartzeiten: Anita Abeson, Melvin Alpert, Deborah Perkow-Belinsky, Betty Bazio, Samuel Berland, Esther Brown, Rose Chernoff, Bertold Dick, Jacob Doppelt, Patricia Elena Doyle, Adeline Dvorkin, Anne Ruth Edelman, Joseph J. Ehrlich, Libby Fink, Minnie Goldberg, Celestine Grossman, Emmanuel K. Grossman, Bernice Hirsch, A.R. Hollander, Dayton Jerome Holmes, Harold Huckberger, Stella Joseph, James Edward Koretz, Augusto Lazo, is that right, Cantor? Thank you. Bernard M. Marks, Irving Nathanson, Mina Bat Yaakov Neiman, Benjamin Oppenheim, Fina Oppenheim, Sylvia Pakin, Regina Schallman, Bertha Scharf, Michael Schwartz, Jerome Jacob Weil, and Warren Witzer. Any additions or corrections?
Additional names from our congregation include Ahmad Arbery, Don Shula, Brian Howe, Mike Storin, Rabbi Kenneth Rosen, and Shirley Washington.
Zichronam Livracha, may the memories of these souls be for blessing, as I invite Cantor to recite the Kaddish tonight.
יתגדל ויתקדש שמי רבה, בעלמא יברח חירותי וימליך מלכותי, בחייכון וביום מכון, ובחיי דכל בית ישראל, בעגלה ובזמן קריב, ואמרו, אמן. יהי שמי רבה מבורך לעולם ועלמי עלמיה, יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר וירומם ויתנשא ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל שמי דקודשה בריחו לעילה מן כל ברכתה ושירתה תושבחתה ונחמתה דאמירן בעלמה ואמרו אמן. יהי שלמה רבה מן שמיה וחיים עלינו ועל כל ישראל, ואמרו אמן. עושה שלום במרמיו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל, ואמרו אמן.
May the one who makes peace in the heavens bring peace to all who mourn and comfort to all who are bereaved, and we say, Amen. All right, we're soon to conclude. An announcement or two, perhaps?
An announcement or two. Drum
Or
roll.
5 or 10, I don't know. Sounds, whichever number you like. Your choice. Cantor's choice.
The Great Oz is going to put up
Aha.
a series of offerings in our virtual village 5959, where you only need to come dressed from the top up, and we would absolutely love to see you. So these many offerings, and this is just this coming week. Check back often. Many, many ways in which to engage, even in these really tricky times. Rabbi?
Lots of ways to connect, Cantor, but in the spirit of tonight's reflection, pre-Mishaberach and Omer, it's very important that you continue helping us help you. In other words, we are more than willing and have been reaching out by all sorts of methods, online, by text, by phone. We don't assume everybody is accessible in the same way, but we want to make sure that if you need us and we're making our rounds and you need us sooner, you're going to let us know that. And we will make that connection. We don't want to make any assumptions about how connected one feels. So help us not over-assume anything about you.
For sure.
We hope everybody is staying well, and to the extent that there's struggle, that we're struggling on with resilience.
Rabbi,
Yes.
it is time for you to close our service with something amazing.
All right, we're going to pick up the pace a little bit. Thank you for walking with us in a very serious kind of Shabbat tonight. So we're going to do something peppy to finish. Here we go, everybody. Sing it out loud. Hallelujah, 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 hallelujah. Kolan Shema, Kolan Shema. Hallelujah, hallelujah, Kolan Shema, hallelujah, 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 hallelujah. Hallelujah, 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 hallelujah. In the spirit of a living Torah, in the spirit of a truth that runs far more authentically when it's inclusive. In the spirit of all those priests who weren't allowed to raise their hands in Duchanan, I invite you to raise your own hands, empowered with the spirit of freedom and the spirit of an evolving Torah that is at its best when it is inclusive. Let us do our part to bless one another tonight. Yivarechecha Adonai v'yishmerecha.
May Adonai bless you and keep you. Ya'er Adonai panav elecha v'huneka.
May God smile upon you and be gracious to you, however you may be abled. Yisa Adonai panav elecha v'yasem lecha. Shalom.
May God lift up God's face to you as you are a sacred vessel and grant you the gift of peace.
Amen.
Can you hear that sound?
Thank you, Cantor Friedman. Happy Mother's Day to you.
Thank you.
To you, Joe, and to
Yeah.
all celebrants. And however you want to celebrate, I hope you find meaning and purpose, as much joy as possible. And if there's a sense of loss or anxiousness or longing, I hope that you are able to feel the love and connection of family and friends. And may we just be sensitive and empathic and compassionate always. You never know when it'll come in handy, when someone is in need. And so let's be on the ready.
Amen.
Shabbat shalom, one and all.
Shabbat shalom.
Shalom.
Maddie, we're so proud of you.
Be well. Shabbat shalom. Shabbat shalom u'mevarach. Happy Mother's Day. Bye-bye.
All right.